Hi everyone, I'm Taysa Brown, the Silviculture Performance Assessment Specialist with the Forest Science Planning and Practices branch. In this session, I'm here with one of the provincial examiners, Alan Shad, and we are going to be covering what to expect during the accreditation exam.
You can also find out more about the exam and the overall accreditation process in the brochure, which is posted on the Ministry of Forests Silviculture Survey's website. If you scroll about halfway down on that page, you'll find it posted under the Accreditation Program and Exams section. The brochure covers necessary prerequisites, there are none, training, the exam, the rewrite policy, marking, and the performance objectives. The whole brochure is useful, but the key pages are the performance objectives, these tables right here. I'd recommend reading them extremely carefully, and I definitely bring a copy on exam day. Now, before you register for the exam, I would encourage you to carefully consider whether you're ready. There's no shame in waiting another field season to get more experience and to study up a bit more. I want to make sure you're going into that exam with the best chance possible of succeeding because it's frankly expensive at $630 plus GST. It's time consuming, it's 2 full days, and it can be stressful. So, to check if you're ready, I would encourage you to watch the Are You Ready YouTube video on this channel. It walks you through every single performance objective, and it covers what you need to demonstrate during the exam to pass. Also link several practice quizzes throughout that video, and I did screenshot some of the QR codes and I pasted them here. I'll just highlight that the stalking status, stratification, statistics quiz in particular is highly similar to the exam. So check it out. I do just want to mention that the format of these practice quizzes will be different than the real exam. These quizzes are auto-graded, so it's mostly multiple choice, true and false, or fill in the blank. Whereas on the exam, you may get a similar question, but you'll probably also be asked to show your work or to explain your answer. If you feel ready, then you'll need to register for an exam. You can find the schedule on the survey's website, again under the Accreditation Program and Exams section. I try to update it every January, February, and again in July and August. The examiners typically offer courses and exam dates in the spring and fall. However, it is based on interest. If there's not enough people registering, they might cancel that date and encourage people to sign up for a different date or in the next season. So if you're interested, let them know as soon as possible. Now, one small tip. When you're picking your date, just remember that some months are easier than others. You'll want to consider when broadleaf trees leaf out and drop in your region if you're not super confident with your broadleaf twig ID. When you're signing up for the exam, you'll hopefully find an option that's not too far from home. We currently have 3 provincial examiners, one for each of the province's regions. If you're on the coast, reach out to Kathy Davis from Silver Fir. She holds courses and the exam down in the Parksville area. Send her an email or give her a call to learn more. Then, if you're in the southern interior, you'll want to go to John Wallace with Wallace Environmental. He's based in Sorrento, but he also offers courses in the exam in other southern locations if there's interest. You can find more information on his website. I've also included his contact info on the slide. Lastly, if you live in the north, send Alan Shad an email or check out his website at technopro.com. He most often holds courses and exams in Prince George, but he's willing to do courses elsewhere if there's adequate registration.
All right, with all that information out of the way, I'm now going to pass it over to Alan Shad. He's delivered dozens and dozens of exams, so he can tell you what to expect when you take the exam.
Thanks, Taysa. Hi, everyone. I'm the examiner for the Northern region, but the process and format for all of the exam locations are the same, with a few exceptions that will be noted later. I'm going to start off with an overview of the exam process. Day 1 is the classroom portion. It begins with everyone signing in and then a quick introduction. We go over safety and logistics, timing of the different sections. It's a summary, similar to what we're doing here in this presentation. You'll then complete the written exam in the morning and the case study after a lunch break. Later in the afternoon, you'll prepare for the field portion that will occur on day 2. The next morning, we'll meet and travel to the field site together. There, you'll complete a survey. You'll begin with a walkthrough, remeasure 5 plots, compile your collected data, produce recommendations, and a final map. The timing and order may vary slightly depending on the examination location. This is largely based on the logistics and drive times to the field site. It can also affect when and where the identification portion of the exam will be located. It could be day 1 or day 2. More on that later. As we saw a few pages back, there are 15 performance objectives. You can think of these as clusters of topics that will be individually tested throughout the exam process. The orange ones, labeled with an H, are extremely high priority. They are in fact critical to your success. You must pass all of them. For example, performance objective number 12 covers the topic of critical site factors. It will be tested both in the case studies and in the field section. The points for all of the questions related to performance objective number 12 are combined, and a passing score of 75% is required. The blue or medium performance objectives are still important, but a little less so. You can still pass the overall exam even though you did not pass a maximum of 2 of the performance objectives labeled medium. So why is this important for you to know? The performance objective number is listed next to each question in the written and the case studies section of the exam. The intent is to help you focus your answer on the topic we are testing you on with that particular question. We'll now provide more details into the individual sections of the exam, starting with the written exam. This component will be 2.5 hours in length. It's a mix of short answer, select the best answer, and true or false. It covers many of the individual performance objectives. You can see which ones by reviewing the marking section of this table. It's from the brochure Teza mentioned earlier. For the exam, we're testing your knowledge and abilities as a silviculture surveyor, not a writer. We don't mark grammar or spelling. Just make sure your answers are clear, understandable, and most importantly, legible. We have some hints to manage your time. Full sentence or essay style answers are not necessary. Use bullet points whenever you can to efficiently answer the questions. There are even a few that can be answered with a single word. If your answer doesn't fit into the space provided, reread the question. We always provide a larger space than what is required. You may be overthinking the question. On that note, make sure you're only answering what is being asked. Your answer needs to be related to the specific performance objective of that question. This will be clearly identified with each question. Think about a strategy for answering the question in advance. For example, you may wish to answer the easy questions first, then use the remaining time to look up the answers in the reference material. Or you may wish to start with questions related to the H or high rated performance objectives, since those performance objectives are critical to you passing the exam, and then move on to the medium ranked questions. Let's look at a couple of sample questions. First thing that you should notice is that the performance objective is provided next to each question number. The intent is to help guide you to the subject being tested. The point value is also provided next to each question. So here's an example question, and it does involve statistics. For this question, you've been provided plot size, the standards unit size, the stocking standards, and the plot data. You'll then fill out the 1138A using this information. You get 1 point for each field on the 1138A. If you make a mistake in one step, we don't penalize you if it carries through to the remaining steps. For example, if you make a mistake calculating standard deviation, you do lose a point. But if you then calculate standard error correctly using the incorrect standard deviation data, you would not lose another point. Similarly, if you interpret the stocking standard correctly based on your calculated average and lower confidence limit, then you'd earn the point, which would go towards the performance objective. Teza is planning on preparing an entire presentation on statistics soon, so stand by for that one. In the meantime, I have two hints. Pay particular attention to the target stocking standard, as this sets the M value that we use in statistics, and as a result, the capped number of well-spaced or free-growing trees found in each of the plot values. My second hint is to pay close attention to the stratum size. This affects the minimum and maximum number of plots required. Okay, after you wrap up the written exam, you'll take a lunch break. When you return, you'll work on a case study for 1.5 hours, normally 5 or 6 questions. These questions cover stocking status, critical site factors, forest health, non-crop vegetation, and general treatment recommendations. What is a case study? Essentially, this is the treatment recommendations section of the exam. The case study is the first opportunity you'll see that the exams themselves are regionally specific. So it will be useful to you to take the exam in a region that you're most familiar with. You don't need to have intimate knowledge of the particular variants or phases within the region, but you should have general knowledge of the differences between the individual subzones. An ESSF, Engelmann spruce subalpine fir subzone, anywhere in the province has similar enough characteristics for you to be able to interpret the case study. Now, to complete the case study, you'll be provided with background information on a particular block, including past survey results, stocking standard, history, and site and stand information. You'll also receive information like these listed on the slide. It includes information that you would normally gather prior to starting your survey or data that you would collect during your survey. History of the disturbance, harvesting, or even a wildfire. Stocking standards will always be included. Treatment history like planting if it's occurred. And of course, the results of a recently completed survey. We draw from a pool of case study questions for each region. While each case study is different, they all have some similarities. Let's look at one as an example. This one comes from the northeast corner of the province. You may want to pause the presentation to get all the details, but suffice to say there's history information, site description like ecosystem, slope, elevation, a statement about the management intent to produce saw logs in a 90 to 100 year rotation, and some information about the disc trenching and planting that occurred on the site. As mentioned earlier, each case study will contain stocking standards, some sort of a table that looks a bit like this. Next, there's some information about a recently completed survey. Always an inventory label, a silviculture label, usually some information about competing vegetation present, and always something regarding forest health factors present. Now for the questions. There's usually 5 or 6 of them. Here's a sample of one. First, take note of the performance objective. In this case, we're looking for an answer that discusses critical site factors. And remember, this is a high priority item. You must get at least 75% on this high priority topic. It's worth 5 points, so keep that one in mind. We're looking for 5 bullets listing and explaining 5 critical site factors. Once again, your answer may look something like this. First thing you'll notice is there's only 3 bullets here. Well, I simply ran out of room on the slide. You'll be given enough space to provide all 5 of your answers. A good answer should point out a problem directly related to the success of the stand's reforestation plan, something that is standing in the way of success. It should include some recognition of the magnitude of the problem. In this case, the competing vegetation problem is so severe it's going to be impossible to achieve free-growing status without a treatment. Once you've completed the case study and handed it to the examiner, you'll be provided an envelope with the materials necessary to prepare for the field portion of the exam. Consider this the things you need to do before you go to the field portion of the exam. The envelope will contain a map of the survey area. The actual block may be larger than the area that you'll be expected to survey. That'll be identified. The package will include some form of imagery. Most often, this is a snapshot out of Google Earth. Once again, the package will always include stocking standards. The format of these varies quite a lot across the province, just like the real world. I most often use the printouts from results because they're readily available and universal across the province. As one might expect, some of the component information on these reports or on the stocking standards may be redacted, so you'll see black blobs, whiteout, or maybe some blank fields. You'll be provided with the necessary plot cards. One copy of the FS 657, 658, 659, and 1138A. In addition, 2 blank maps. One labeled Preliminary Stratification. You'll complete this one today. The other blank map is titled Final Stratification. You'll complete that one on day 2. To make your field day less stressful, use the time available to you to complete those mandatory components. Things like your name, the date, the rest of those things that we already know. Let's get them over with now so you don't have to be stressed out tomorrow. Let's look at that preliminary stratification map in a little more depth. We're asking you to read through the package of materials provided. Read the silviculture prescription, the opening summary report, look at the Google Earth image. Using the information that you've been given so far, draw and label your initial thoughts on stratification for this opening. We realize this is likely to change when you see the field site tomorrow. What we're looking for here is your initial impressions, your pre-field stratification. Remember, standards unit boundaries are always your first level of stratification. Next, we'll cover the fresh sample identification portion of the exam. This may occur on day 1 or 2, depending on the logistics of your particular exam location. The examiner will let you know ahead of time. In the few days prior to the examiner will collect fresh samples from the surrounding area. Each will be labeled in some fashion and then organized at the designated site. There will be 8 forest health samples. The only correct answer is the 2 or 3-letter pest code. There will be 7 tree species identification samples. The only correct answer is the 2 or 3-letter code as found on page 2 of the FS 660. Keep that one handy. There will also be 4 vegetation species. Abbreviations for these becomes a little trickier. I know there's many locally used abbreviation systems, but the only thing we can use here is the provincially approved system, which again you'll find in the FS 660, which uses a 4 and 3 system. The first 4 letters of the genus, followed by the 3 letters of the species. If that doesn't work for you, you could also use the full Latin name or a common name. Now here gets tricky again. Simply using something like alder, it's not specific enough. I've been asked, are all the samples different? My answer, maybe. Have you ever been in a plot where you've seen a very happy spruce with long, lush needles, and in the same plot, a short-needled spruce with kind of an off yellowy color to them? They may be the same species, or maybe not, and that's really the point. The last of the samples to be identified is soils, or more specifically, soil texture and percent coarse fragments. The examiners have multiple 20-liter buckets of soil that has been lab tested. We rotate the buckets at each exam. The soils and coarse fragments section of the exam is a rare situation where we vary from normal real-world practices during the exam process. Normally, simply selecting a low, medium, or high level of coarse fragments is suitable for a silviculture survey. But on exam day, sorry, we have to do something a little bit different. You'll be asked to record the percent of coarse fragments, not simply the grouping or classification, but the actual number. When we mark this, you'll get a correct answer as long as your numerical value is within a range 20% higher or lower than the value we received from the lab. This same concept is used for soils, but it gets complicated again. So instead of just telling us that it's a silty loam, you need to tell us the percentage of sand, percentage of silt, and percentage of clay within that particular sample. Well, now how the heck do you do that? We recommend that you do your soils classification as you normally would and come up with your soil abbreviation name. Then find that name on the soil triangle. In this example, you found the soil texture to be a clay loam. The bottom edge of the soil triangle tells us that a clay loam typically has just over 30% sand. It also has just over 30% clay. The remaining percent to total 100 must be silt. Your answer would be 32% sand, 32% clay, 36% silt. When we mark this, as long as your value is within 20% of what the lab told us it was, you get a correct answer. All right, next, let's chat a bit about the logistics for day 2. First point, we go, rain or shine. And yes, I have done an exam once where it snowed all day. It was awful. Everybody did pretty well though. You'll be responsible for your own travel. We'll meet at a location discussed on day 1. I understand it's not particularly environmentally friendly, and your supervisor may have some objections. Your vehicle will become your field office for the day. For obvious reasons, we can't allow more than one person working in a vehicle, so plan ahead for this. How are you going to deal with a space for you to do your paperwork when it's raining? We'll travel out in convoy style. If necessary, the examiner will take care of the duties of calling out their kilometers on radio-restricted roads. Travel time is less than 1 hour for the meeting place, and 4-wheel drive is not required. You'll complete a walkthrough of the entire survey area. Map the strata you identify, which could mean you are confirming or rejecting your preliminary stratification done on day 1. Label each stratum on the map and estimate their area. No, it doesn't need to be perfect here, just something reasonable. Using the walkthrough answer sheets provided, there are 5 questions covering 5 performance objectives for the area we'll call Stratum A, which is the area closest to the 5 plots that you will be remeasuring. Your answers for Stratum A should be quite detailed. There are 2 additional questions for each additional strata that you find. As part of the field exam, you will need to fill out all of the survey cards, including the FS 657. Many of these fields aren't essential components. They may only be desired where it would influence a prescription or to provide a more complete description of a stratum, or they may be entirely optional. Since this is an exam, we need to see that you know how to fill out all of the fields. So please do fill out the card as fully as possible, even though some of the components will not be particularly useful. Now for marking, we do take into account the importance of the various fields. Fields that are important for completing the survey correctly or that may influence a treatment recommendation are weighted more heavily. Here's a screenshot of our marking key. If you want to learn more about it, refer to the Are You Ready YouTube video. In it, Teza explains the color coding. You'll be asked to remeasure 5 plots. When I set up an exam site, I use 2x2 posts, approximately ½ meter long, painted orange, with the plot number printed on the side, driven into the ground. They are 20 to 30 meters apart. You can generally see from one to the next. Kathy and John will do something similar. There's no need for you to map the location of these plots at all. The location of these plots are manipulated intentionally by the examiner to find testable conditions, such as a plantable spot in a nearly fully stocked stratum. Do you need to record that plantable spot, even though you have no intention of planting this near fully stocked stratum? The answer is yes. After all, what other opportunity do we have to test you on your ability to locate and record plantable spots? This is the final difference between exam day and the real world. I'll simplify that difference for you. If it's in the plot, count it, record it. Complete as many of the fields on the cards as possible. One last thing, that's the sample tree information. Just like in the real world, we're going to ask you to collect age, height, crown closure, and brush competition on plots 1, 3, and 5 only. Once you've completed the walkthrough and remeasured the plots that have been established, you'll be filling out the FS 659. This is where having the office space and the use of your vehicle will come in handy. Be sure to include treatment recommendations and an alternative on the back side of the FS 659. Use the well-spaced tree or free-growing tree data, whichever is more appropriate, to complete the FS 1138A. And once again, don't forget the recommendation at the bottom. Be clear to state whether the area is SR, NSR, free-growing, or needs more plots.
Thanks, Alan, for explaining the exam process. I'll now cover some tips on preparing for the exam. It's important to remember that this is an open book exam, so you'll want to prepare differently than if it was a closed book exam. You don't need to know everything, but you need to know where or how to find an answer efficiently. It is a timed exam, so being efficient is important. You'll want to get familiar with the structure of all your references in advance, and I recommend using sticky notes, tabs, or even highlighting answers to possible questions in advance. I'd also recommend making cheat sheets. For most people, that's particularly important for stats. For my stats cheat sheet, I'd write out instructions on using the standard deviation function on my stats calculator. I'd also have a good example of the 1138A to compare to. On that note, if you're new to stats, I'd recommend watching my newly posted video on doing stats by hand and filling out the 1138A. You can find it on the YouTube channel. Lastly, I'd recommend practicing in advance, like how you're going to do the exam. So that means doing data collection and stats by hand, even if you have data collection software available to you. That also means collecting all of the Ministry of Forest fields, even if your employer or client doesn't require all of them. On the last slide, I mentioned that you should practice collecting and compiling data on paper cards in advance and learning the structure of paper references. That's important because electronics are not allowed during this exam. So that means no data collection apps, no tablets or cell phones, and no communication with people off-site. Other than that, you can choose what equipment to bring. You'll want all your typical survey tools like plot cord, planting shovel, measuring tape, clinometer, knife, handsaw, increment borer, field notebook, pencils, etc. You also need to do statistics, so don't forget your stats calculator. You'll also want to bring some references. Now, none of these references are mandatory. You'll need to choose what to bring, but all of these are on this slide, on this list for a reason. However, don't just bring them to bring them. Make sure that you know how to use them and where to find information within them. You might also want to bring a map showing the BEC subzones. So you can actually download these maps off the BEC website. And this web link on the slide will take you to an interactive map where you can select a region and then print your target area of interest. So that would probably be a 1 hour drive from your exam city. Now, for a few final suggestions, it really does pay off to have a solid year of survey experience under your belt, or at least a summer of doing surveys full time. Without that, you may not develop adequate experience completing the different survey types, like regen delay, stalking, and free growing, or the alternative survey methods, like DFP, CEDRIS, layered, or multi-storied. It also takes time to work in all the different BEC subzones and variants in your region and to see a wide range of forest health issues and site limiting factors. This type of practical hands-on experience makes the exam so much easier and less stressful. On that note, you'll want to take the exam locally so that your practical experience can fully pay off. You would be at a disadvantage to take the exam on the coast if your experience was all in the north. It can be done, absolutely, but you'll need to be prepared for the differences, including accessing paper copies of all the local field guides for the area of the exam. Okay, that's a wrap. Thanks so much for watching. Between this video and the Are You Ready video, I hope you feel prepared for what to expect during the exam. Good luck on the exam and happy surveying.